Imagine a time when the world did not measure wealth in banks, interest rates, or digital numbers glowing on a screen. A time before skyscrapers, oil tycoons, and trillion-dollar corporations. In the early 14th century, during an era when Europe struggled to survive plagues, wars, and famine, a kingdom in West Africa quietly stood as a beacon of prosperity. It was a land where the earth itself glittered with gold, and rivers carried wealth along trade routes older than some empires. Rising from this golden soil was a ruler whose fortune would eclipse every monarch, emperor, sultan, or industrial magnate that history would ever produce. His name was Mansa Musa, ruler of the Mali Empire, a man whose wealth was so vast that modern economists cannot truly calculate it. Some historians believe he was worth over $400 billion in today's terms, while others argue that his empire's treasures were so enormous, no contemporary measurement can describe them accurately. His story is one of unimaginable luxury, power, faith, and a legacy carved into the sands of history. Centuries before Europe realized Africa's economic importance, West Africa thrived as one of the richest regions on Earth. The Sahara Desert, often mistaken today as nothing but dunes and heat, was once a flourishing network of trade highways. Merchants traveled in caravans stretching for miles, connecting the Mediterranean world to sub-Saharan Africa. They moved salt, ivory, slaves, textiles, copper, cola nuts, and above all else gold. At the heart of this network was the Empire of Mali. Its cities were filled with merchants who spoke many languages, scholars who copied ancient manuscripts, and traders who negotiated with Arabs and Berbers from distant lands. Within Mali's borders, gold was not merely a treasure. It was a foundation of life, governance, diplomacy, and culture. Kings could levy taxes on trade passing through their land, and those taxes piled up into unimaginable reserves. But unlike some rulers who hoarded wealth, Mali's kings understood the power of organized trade. They encouraged education, agriculture, and craftsmanship, turning the empire into not just a gold mine, but a sophisticated civilization. Under strategic leadership, Mali controlled gold mines in Bambouk and Bure, areas that together supplied at least half of the world's total gold production at that time. Cities like Timbuktu, Niamey, Gao, and Jin became magnets for travelers, intellectuals, and traders. Mali's power was built not solely through war or conquest, but through the clever mastery of commerce. And atop this prosperous empire, destiny would place a man unlike any other, Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa was born around the year 1280 into a royal Mandinka lineage. Yet, despite his noble upbringing, he was not originally destined to rule the empire. His rise to power came from an event that sounds more like legend than historical reality. His predecessor, Mansa Abu Bakr II, was a ruler obsessed with the unknown. He was captivated by the question that mystified many cultures: what lies beyond the endless horizon of the Atlantic Ocean? Convinced that he could discover lands across the sea, Abu Bakr organized an enormous expedition, hundreds of ships manned by sailors, builders, scholars, and soldiers. He sailed west and never returned. Whether he perished, discovered new lands, or reached the Americas remains one of history's greatest enigmas. In the absence of a ruler, Musa, who served as deputy, was crowned king in 1312. He now inherited not only the crown, but also an empire that controlled the trade arteries of Africa. Musa was religious, strategic, intelligent, and ambitious. His first act as emperor was not to demonstrate military power, but to strengthen Mali's economy and scholarship. Through alliances, he expanded Mali's influence deep into present-day Senegal, Mauritania, and Niger. Under his reign, the gold mines flourished, and so did trade cities. Musa was not simply rich. He became the embodiment of African wealth, and his fame would soon travel far beyond the Sahara. To call Mansa Musa wealthy is almost an understatement. His fortune cannot be compared to that of modern billionaires and trillionaires whose assets rise and fall with markets. Musa's wealth came from complete control of production. Every grain of gold dust, every nugget from the mines, and every shipment of trade passing through Mali added to his treasury. Mali's gold fueled economies across North Africa, the Middle East, and Southern Europe. Gold was not merely a luxury commodity. It was the economic bloodstream of civilizations at that time. Historians estimate that Musa personally owned so much gold that he could shift the value of global markets. Mali also controlled massive salt mines, a resource as crucial as gold because salt preserved food. In some regions, salt was traded weight for weight with gold. Musa's income also came from taxation, agricultural land, trade duties, and military control over trade routes. Slavery, tragically, was also part of this system, as enslaved workers extracted mineral wealth from mines and farms. Thus, Musa's riches were a combination of natural resource control, labor exploitation, economic strategy, and political dominance. In every sense, he was wealth incarnate. In 1324, Mansa Musa decided to perform the Hajj, a religious pilgrimage to Mecca, as required of all Muslims who were able. But Musa's journey would not be a simple spiritual trip. It would become the most luxurious expedition ever recorded. Musa's caravan included over 60,000 men, among them soldiers, merchants, scholars, servants, and enslaved workers. 12,000 slaves, each dressed in fine silk, carried gold ingots weighing kilograms. 80 camels, each loaded with hundreds of pounds of gold dust and ingots, led the procession through the Sahara. The nobles accompanying Musa wore embroidered garments and carried gold-handled swords. Musicians played instruments along the journey, and cooks prepared feasts in the desert. Wherever the caravan stopped, Musa built mosques, donated gold to the poor, paid off debts, and purchased textiles, spices, and goods at prices no merchant had ever seen. His generosity was so grand that people could scarcely believe he was human. To the citizens of Cairo, Damascus, and Medina, Musa seemed like a character out of legend, a king with the wealth of entire continents flowing through his hands. Yet Musa's generosity had economic consequences so severe that they became part of world history. When he arrived in Cairo, the city was already a thriving metropolis under the control of the Mamluk Sultan al-Nasir Muhammad. Musa exchanged gifts, purchased goods, and gave away immense gold quantities to locals, merchants, slaves, and rulers. His spending was so excessive that the value of gold dropped dramatically, causing hyperinflation. Prices of everyday goods soared. Cairo's economy was thrown into chaos for more than a decade. Think about this. One man, by merely spending his money, disrupted one of the strongest economies of the medieval world. He had too much wealth for global markets to handle. Yet Mansa Musa's greatest achievement was not his extravagant pilgrimage. It was what he brought back from it. During his trip, he recruited architects, scholars, and engineers. One of the most famous was Abu Ishaq Esahili, an Andalusian architect who introduced new architectural styles to West Africa. With their expertise, Musa built universities, libraries, madrasas, and mosques that transformed Mali into a center of global learning. The most famous of these is the Jingareber Mosque of Timbuktu, which still stands today, built with mud, wood, and gold-infused plaster. Timbuktu became a beacon for scholars across Africa and the Middle East. Books became more valuable than gold. Students traveled from thousands of miles away to study astronomy, mathematics, law, and medicine. The libraries of Timbuktu contained hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, some of which survive today, protected in wooden chests and buried vaults. In Musa's time, education became a national treasure, more prized than luxury or conquest. Mansa Musa died around 1332, though some records place his death slightly later. His reign left Mali richer, more educated, and globally respected. His sons inherited his legacy, but the empire lacked a leader with his visionary abilities. Trade routes shifted, invaders attacked, and political fragmentation weakened the empire. The world slowly forgot the magnitude of Mali's riches. Many of its manuscripts were hidden, its cities fell silent, and its story faded under centuries of sand and neglect. But history did not erase him completely. European mapmakers, stunned by stories of his wealth, placed Mali on their maps. The Catalan Atlas of 1375 shows Mansa Musa holding a golden orb, sitting proudly on a throne. He became a symbol of African prosperity and excellence, contradicting centuries of ignorance and colonial narratives that falsely portrayed Africa as land without civilization. Today, economists struggle to define his wealth. Historians debate his impact. But one truth remains unquestioned. No individual in history ever commanded as much wealth as Mansa Musa. His riches built cities, uplifted education, and changed global economies. His legacy proves that Africa was not a passive recipient of history. It helped shape it. Mansa Musa's story teaches us that wealth is not measured by how much gold a person owns, but by what they leave behind. His empire thrived on knowledge, commerce, and culture. His investments in education outlasted his fortune. Today, as we admire billionaires and industrial empires, we must remember the man whose generosity bought not luxuries, but wisdom and legacy. Mansa Musa remains not just the richest man who ever lived, but one of the few who used his wealth to enlighten a civilization.